Hey guys, I'm working on my videos, trying to make them a little shorter, a little more interesting. So today I am working on a 2008 Audi A4 2.0T Quattro. It's the FSI. You can see right here, the engine cover, 2.0 FSI. This one has a timing belt in the front and utilizes a piggyback chain for the intake camshaft on the back side. A major issue with these is that the tensioner wears out, or the chain stretches, or a little bit of both, and then you get the noise on startup, and maybe it runs rough and whatnot. And that's what we got going on with this one. I just got it for my wife. We're looking to retire the 01 27T. I'm gonna miss her, but we don't need her anymore if we got this one. So, but I got to do some maintenance on this before we start driving it more frequently, just to make sure that everything's good to go. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start taking this stuff apart. I'm gonna pull the timing cover off, the valve cover, get the PCV out of the way, start unhooking the fuel lines, because we have a high pressure fuel pump right here because it's direct injected. Be careful with the high pressure stuff. That's a lot of pressure in that, so be gentle with all that. It's got a vacuum pump off the back because turbocharged engines don't really make much vacuum, and we got to have something to run the brake booster. Yeah, and I'll just get the coil packs out of the way and all that, and then I'll start up the next video. Alright? Okay, here are my parts and tools I just got from ECS Tuning. I would buy all my German stuff from them. They have a really good selection, great prices. They have an entire kit to do the timing chain on the 2.0T. And they have both kits because there's the TSI and the FSI. This is the FSI kit. The TSI has just a chain, no belt. So that one's completely different. Don't accidentally get that one. But it comes with the valve cover gasket. I did have to buy the cam hold down tool, cam lock tool, separate. Schwaben. Very sturdy, high quality. I did have to buy the socket. What's that called again? It's I can't remember. Poly drive. There we go. Poly drive. This goes in the back side of the cam sprocket, cam phaser. There's a bolt in there to take that sprocket off. This guy goes in there. Don't use a Torx. It's not going to fit quite right, and you'll probably break it off. This is heavy duty. It'll work nice. But I had to buy that separate. I had to buy the cam lock tool separate. But the kit came with the valve cover gasket, the timing chain tensioner, and there's two different kits. I bought the nice one with the better tensioner and the better timing chain. There's the timing chain cover gasket, a new bolt for the cam phaser. Yes, you need to replace it. These bolts, not totally sure if these need to be replaced, but the kit comes with them, so they're getting replaced. And we got 3 more bolts here for something else. I'm not sure exactly what these ones are for, but I think those ones are for the high pressure fuel pump. We got a couple of O-rings here, our PCV gasket, this guy goes on the end of our high pressure fuel pump. That part rides on the camshaft. And don't do that and drop it on the floor. Now I gotta clean it. So just a little bucket spring side goes inside there. That rides against the camshaft. So it came with that. Everything that should be needed, unless you don't have the tools, which I had to buy the tools. You're also going to need your triple square set, which is this specialty one. Looks like almost like a reverse 12 point. That's a triple square. There's a couple of bolts that are triple square on there. Definitely going to need your Torx bits. T25 was the first Torx bit that I used. That one was for the PCV valve. And the PCV has 4 bolts. Note that. We have one on the bottom here that's kind of difficult to get to. I actually used a swivel. So PCV sits like that. And the bolt is right there. So I had to use a swivel to get up underneath there. And then used a magnet so that I didn't drop the bolt. That's probably going to be fun to get back in. But then there's another bolt there, another bolt there, another bolt there. Those ones are easy to spot. No big deal. Got your squeeze connectors with an O-ring. Make sure you don't break your PCV. You also have the connector right here. Goes up underneath that hose. That gets the PCV out of the way. Now I took the breather box inlet. I took that out of the way just to get it out of the way. All it is 2 Phillips screws right here. Pretty easy. And then this side just snaps up, slides out. Stick it over on the floor somewhere. When you're unplugging your ignition coils, start at one end. I started at the far end towards the front of the car and just got them unclicked one at a time. And then, see, it's in this plastic piece. You have to pull all of them at the same time. And there's 2 bolts on top of the valve cover, 8mm. Take those out, then unclip them, slide that out of the way. Your coil packs, they are snap-in. Now if they've never been pulled out, they are going to fight you. I used this very, very gently. This is a plastic valve cover. Be very, very gentle. Give it a little wiggle. Try to pull on it from the other side. Maybe hit it with 2 pry bars gently, just to even out to disperse your force, so you're not breaking the plastic valve cover. There's the plastic valve cover. But so those just snap in. Now if you want them to work better in the future, mine came out super easy. I did use that just to make it a little bit easier, because the 2 on the back are a little harder to get your hands on. The 2 on the front I just pulled right out. If you want to make it a little bit easier, just a little tiny bit of dielectric grease down in there, just on the tip of the plug, and that'll make that slip out so much easier. Dielectric grease. Don't use anything else. It's got to be dielectric. Don't use too much either. Too much can be a bad thing as well. Just a little dab. That's all you need. I was pretty happy to notice that this engine is very clean. Looks like the oil was changed regularly. I mean, there's a little dirty spot there, but for the most part, this engine is very clean. So I got my coil packs out of the way, I got my harness out of the way. There is a couple of connectors for this guy, for your fuel pump. See this one? The clip is actually on the bottom side. Feel for that guy. It's the same as all the other clips, so just pull on that little tab, snaps off. snap this guy off, pull that out of the vacuum pump, and then just set it aside, get it out of your way. I did disconnect the fuel line coming in. If you haven't let it set overnight, there will be a little bit of pressure in there. Open it very slowly. Make sure all the pressure's off before you pull that line out of there. Okay, and then I've just stuffed it up there out of the way. I've got my vacuum line at the firewall right here is pulled out, getting ready for my vacuum pump to come out. There's a little plate for the fuel line, just a 10mm little bolt right here. Easy peasy. Just get that out of your way so you got more easy access to your fuel pump. When I pulled the timing cover, there are 2 bolts on the top. Easy peasy. The fun part is, and don't do what I did, I managed to break my connector for my cam sensor. Woohoo! I get to change that eventually. For now it'll be okay, but that's your cam sensor connector down there. Let's get some light on that so you can see what I'm talking about. Just right down in there. Get that guy out of your way. And then the timing cover is kind of a tight fit. So it'll slide out from behind that. Once you've got the connector off and the 2 bolts on the top off, just pull it back, give it a little wiggle, pop it out. Getting it back in is going to be making sure everything's lined up a little bit more difficult, but you should be able to figure it out. It's not rocket science. Just make sure it's in there correctly. You don't want it rubbing on anything. But you pull that before you pull your valve cover. And then you've got a whole bunch of bolts for the valve cover itself. You got these 2 hoses right here. Got this little hose here, the squeeze connector. Just pop that off. Valve cover's out of the way, pretty easy. Okay, don't make fun of my dipstick. That's out of a 27T. My other one broke. I just needed something to seal the hole for now, until I get the new get the new oil dipstick. Yeah, the sizes that I used for the fuel line are 14 on the small end and a 17 on the large end. All your valve cover and timing cover bolts, those are a T30. Yeah, I think that's it for right now. I will get back to you when you get a little bit further into it. Alright, back again. I had to run down to the auto parts store and pick up a 12.19mm to put on the crank. It has to be a 12 point. That's the actual shape of the bolt on the crankshaft is 12 points. It's 19mm, like I said, just cheap socket. I didn't happen to have that one in a 12 point, so I had to go buy one. I've got lots of other 12 points. Didn't happen to have that one. But, so I did that. Look for your, if you can see that right there, the little timing mark on the cam sprocket. You line that up with your timing mark on the cover, that arrow right there. So you want to line that guy up, and you will see these notches in the camshaft will be facing each other. Now, I heard that, and they do line up with the head bolts, that those are there so that you can pull the cylinder head without pulling the camshaft assembly. And it looks true because it all lines up with the head bolts. Now, if you don't have any camshaft position codes, then you don't have to pay any attention to this, but if you do have a camshaft position code, I think it's like a P0016 or something like that, just take a look at your cams, and if you look directly down at them, you will notice there's a little bit of a bevel to it, but there's a flat section, and that should line right up with your bolt, that flat section on both sides when your timing is aligned. So if one of your camshafts is off a tooth, you will see it right here. It'll be subtle, but you'll see it if you're paying attention. As you see, I got the rear timing cover off as well. So when I was pulling the high pressure fuel pump, there are 3 bolts. I'm going to go show you so you have a good idea what you're looking at. See that guy? There's one there, one by my thumb. Now see that port right there? That is to hook up a fuel pressure gauge or whatever, check your fuel pressure. That's a 13 millimeter. Pull that out of there, and then you can get to this bolt. There doesn't appear to be anything in there that will fall out, but I was careful when I pulled it out, made sure nothing fell out of there, because sometimes they hide springs inside little orifices like that, or check balls, and I hadn't had that apart before, so I wasn't sure, but I didn't see anything in there. You should be okay. Just keep an eye out. Reach inside, pull out your bucket. That's where that guy goes, right on the end of your high pressure fuel pump. And if you remember, I do have a brand new one of those, so we'll put a brand new one in. And actually it will sit right in here on the rear timing cover. Rear timing cover has 7 bolts. You've got 4 easy to get to at the top, T30, and then you have 3. Let's get my light. I can't see that real well. The hole to the left is the bolt hole. The other one is the oil passage. And then one right here. One here, one here, one here. The one in the middle, on the bottom, there's also a bolt that will be directly next to it that goes to that water jacket down there, if you can see it. You don't need to pull the bolt with the water jacket. So as you're looking at it just like this, if you feel in there, back there with your fingers, you will feel 2 bolts right there dead center. The one that you are after is the harder to get to one to the right. So towards the driver's side, this is a left-hand drive car. Towards the driver's side, go for that bolt. You don't need to pull the other bolt. I pulled that out and realized, hey, this is a different color, and then went back in there and like, oh, okay, I missed a bolt. So be careful of that. If you try to pry your cover open and you pulled the wrong bolt, you could snap an ear off. That would be a bad day. Then you got to go get a new cover. So yeah, I just used the T30 to do that. When I pulled my vacuum pump out of the way, and I pulled that out of the way before I lined up the camshafts, so I'll have to spin this little guy here, this flat blade, and line that up when I go to put it back in. Your vacuum pump also has, I think it was just 3 bolts. Yep. Munchkin! Hold on, I'll be right back. Hey guys, back again. So what I was talking about before I was interrupted by my cute little daughter. We have 3 bolts for your vacuum pump. The bottom one is this larger flat one, so remember where that one goes. It goes down low in the back. So just 3 bolts to get the vacuum pump out. And you also have to it's kind of tight to pull out. I was able to just pop the vacuum off right here on the firewall, and I left the hoses hooked up. You could unhook the hoses if you want to. I just didn't want to ruin these nice clamps and then have to put a not as great clamp on there. Those clamps work really well, so I like to leave them whenever I can. Yeah, vacuum pump was pretty easy, not too bad. It popped out. Okay guys and gals, this is, hang on, I'm gonna grab the light. See that notch right there? That is your timing mark. And you'll notice there's a one length that's a different color. So you line that up with the line on your sprocket and then count out not the actual pins, but the ones next to. So 1, 2, like that. Count out 18 and 19. Away. And there they are. You can see that. I've marked those, so I'll be able to tell that's where my other timing mark is on my other sprocket. It will sit, that sprocket will sit, or that tooth will sit right between the 18th and 19th pin away from the colored link. And as you can see, I've got my borescope set up right here so that we can actually see. And that little dot right there, that is your timing mark. And I've just kind of drawn a line up to that tooth. But that's your timing mark right there. And it's just kind of right here. You can use a mirror to do this. I just figured it was easier to use my borescope. And I don't get the chance to use it that often, so may as well for what I paid for it. So I wanted to show you guys that, and then next I'm going to get the timing chain on and show you how to line up the sprocket so it slips on. Okay, what I think I missed on the high pressure fuel pump. So when I pulled this guy off of there, I did the 3 bolts. I told you a 13 millimeter to pull your port, your pressure check port. Make sure to relieve the pressure very carefully. That's a lot of pressure in there. Just make sure to relieve it very carefully before you crack the lines and all that. Or if you do crack the lines, do it very slowly. So like I said, that's thousands of psi there. That's not your usual 50, 60 psi or whatever there. When I pulled this pump out, I left this hose hooked up because it's hard to get to the clamps. You unplug your 2 connectors. I think I already went over that because that one has the piece on the bottom, so you gotta make sure you don't break it. The fuel line, that was interesting. The high pressure line goes in right here. It's really tight fit. Let's see, get some light on there for you. See that ball shaped guy, the line? That's your high pressure line, and your little high pressure nut right here. So that comes off easy enough. The problem is getting wrenches in there to get it off. It's a 17 millimeter. What I did was I broke it loose with the 17 millimeter, and then I went in with an 18 millimeter so that I had a little bit of slop, and that's how I finished loosening it up. So I got that off of there, and then once that was, I was able to pull the pump out. Then I was able to get to the clamp for that hose that I left on there. It was easier to get to the clamp after pulling the pump part way out. That's how I did it. You're welcome to get to the clamp however you see fit. That's up to you. I just found it easier that way. So that's how I did it. So let's see here, where else? I talked about the timing cover, all the bolts for the timing cover. When you pull that back timing cover off, you've got your cam actuator set up here, slides inside the cam sprocket. So that has to come all the way. You slide it back towards the firewall, and there is just barely enough room. You got to kind of wiggle it and pop it out. It will come out. It's very tight. Just be aware of that. Be gentle with it. You don't want to damage the seals or anything. Just be gentle and give it a little wiggle and pop that out. So I think that's where we're at now. I'm getting ready to install the cam lock tool. Is this guy right here. You take your bolts out of the bracket, and then they go through these holes, and they actually bolt to the cylinder head. So you want to set that in there, and then this is where the poly drive is going to come in. Some people are using a T55. That's not the correct tool. This is the correct tool. It's called a poly drive. See, it's not quite a Torx. It's different shaped. This will fit perfectly in there. And if you get the ECS kit, like I did, it will come with a brand new bolt. But if you don't get the kit, make sure you get that bolt. That bolt is important. If you reuse a torque to yield bolt, which is what that is, you're chancing that bolt snapping off. That bolt snaps off, boom, timing done. There was no point of doing this job in the first place. So make sure you get that bolt. You got your poly drive, slides right in there. Now, I've heard these break loose really hard. I'm gonna give it a go, and just be really careful when you do yours not to strip it out, or you'll have to replace the whole camshaft, is what I hear, and that's not fun. That's probably quite pricey. But you get your cam lock tool in place first. You break that loose. When you torque it back up, I got the spec from multiple locations. I do not trust one location, so by all means, please look this up. Even after hearing it on the video, the torque for that bolt is 20 Newton meters and 45 degrees. So you torque it to 20 Newton meters, click, and then you need to turn it an extra 45 degrees. Now, if you're not sure what 45 degrees is, Let's see if I can find my tool here. My shop's a mess right now. I've got too many projects in the works. I know it's here somewhere. Oh, I actually made a spot for it. I was cleaning up the other day. Boom. That right there is 90 degrees. So 45 is direct. That handle would be 45 degrees. In other words, an eighth of a turn. Because 90 degrees is a quarter of a turn. If it helps you, set up one of these little guys, you know, just to in place and get a feel for what you're about to do. And you can guesstimate out 45 degrees. That's how I do it. Or you can go borrow a angle meter or an angle meter torque wrench. The torque wrenches are really nice. I've used them before. It makes doing head bolts really, really fast. They are handy, but they are super expensive. So if you can't afford that, just make sure that you're as close to the 45 degrees as possible. If you're off a degree, yeah, you'll probably be alright. And if you're curious what 20 Newton meters is in foot pounds, 20 Newton meters in foot pounds is 14.75 foot pounds and some change. So you could round that to 15 and you'd be okay. And that's what I think a lot of people are doing, just round it to 15. That's pretty close. Because it's a torque to yield, it doesn't have to be exact down to the thousandths or whatever. But as close as possible is the goal, okay? So I think I went over that. I'm going to get this straightened out here. Hopefully I got enough memory on my camera because I just ran out a few minutes ago. I had to dump a bunch of stuff. I'll be back. Okay, when I broke that cam sprocket bolt loose, your cam phaser bolt loose, I used my big snap-in half drive ratchet and I struggled. That's how much torque it took to break that loose. And if you look at my poly drive real close, it's twisted just a little bit. That's how much torque it took to break that loose. So work your way. I slowly applied power until it finally broke loose. Because if you just kind of bump, then that's how, like, the cams have to move to the point where the lock actually holds it. So you'll lose a little bit of power there. So move it till it catches on there. And then if you were to bump it real quick too hard, you could strip that bolt out easily. I could totally see how people strip those out. And it's probably just bumping it too hard. What I did was even pressure till it broke loose. And it sounded like something actually broke when it broke loose. So be aware of that. Now I've got it back together. I've got it torqued. So what I did was I just used my little 3/8 torque wrench, brought it to just under 15 foot-pounds, torqued the bolt to just under 15 foot-pounds, and when I went the 45 degrees, I used the big ratchet again because I could not get it with my long 3/8 drive. I needed a little more leverage. And make sure you bring your cams all the way to the cam stop tool. before you start counting your degrees. Lining up your sprocket to go on. So make sure your tensioner is on first, obviously. Tensioner goes on first. Pin would be in. There's 3 bolts. If you got the ECS kit like I did, there are 3 brand new bolts for that tensioner with blue thread locker on them already, ready to go. I put those in and tighten them down. Spec says 7 foot-pounds. The top one clicked. The bottom 2 were making me nervous. I went as tight as I dare go. Worried about stripping the threads on that. They are pretty tight. I'm pretty sure if I go any tighter, they could strip out. So be careful of that. But don't go too tight and actually strip those out, because that plate, the backer part of that tensioner, actually sits against the cylinder head. See that? And there's a screen and oil passage and everything, so that has to sit perfectly against that, nice and tight. That's where the oil comes in. So make sure that is tight, but don't strip it out. Kind of a difficult situation there. I really wanted to go to spec, but I couldn't. You'll notice these vice grips on the camshaft. I'm not happy about doing it that way, but that's what everybody else is doing. It leaves a couple little marks on the camshaft I'm not happy about, but it won't actually hurt anything. So when you're putting that on, make sure you line up your timing marks. I've got my chain marked and lined up with the tooth. I already had my link my mark link on the chain, lined up with the timing mark on the phaser sprocket, and then made sure that I lined up these 2 pins with the 18 and 19th pin away from there. Lined those up with the tooth there and the mark. Then you'll find it won't slide on, so you have to rotate your intake camshaft back, so towards the passenger side of the car. Rotate it back, maybe give it a little wiggle, and it'll pop right in. Make sure it's popped all the way in before putting your bolt in. Everything looks good there. One extra thing that I did that I didn't hear anybody mention was I put some engine assembly lube, some thick Permatex red engine assembly lube. I stuck that on the guide plates of the tensioner, just because, I mean, it's technically plastic and it's not going to get oil for a couple seconds when you first fire it up, so that's a high wear component. I made sure there's a little bit of lubricant on it. Yeah, so I think that's about up to date. I'm going to pull my locking tool off and start putting some more stuff back together. Alright, hey guys, got it all back together, running good. Timing was right on, no codes or anything going on. Putting the rest of it back together is pretty easy. Just, I mean, watch your gasket when you're putting the rear timing cover back on. You'll notice there's like a, I think it was blue. I don't know what I did with my old parts. There they are. So you'll notice on the old timing cover gasket, yeah, it was blue, that blue strip just goes across the top, and there's only one way to put that on. That's actually supposed to go against the back of the head. You'll see it's not on the other side, and that seals up where the the camshaft cover, camshaft main support structure, the aluminum part here on this one, where that meets the top of the cylinder head on both sides. So that seals that up. You don't have to worry about the RTV on the ends like you normally would. That gasket should seal it all up without having to do any of that. And you know, you want to be careful with the RTV on anything with VVT anyways, because if you get a little too much, it ends up in the engine. It could end up in, say, that screen in your tensioner or inside your VVT system. Not a good day. When I put the fuel pump back on, brand new little bucket guy, took a ride against the camshaft. I put some of that Permatex engine assembly lube on there, so that would be nice and slippery for the initial startup. I turned the key on and cracked this line. Careful, it's going to spray fuel, but I cracked this line just to get the air out of the system. And then I also bled this valve back here a little bit, so it fired up pretty quick. A direct injected engine can get aerated pretty bad, and it could take a little bit to start up if you don't bleed that air out of the system. So this one fired right up pretty quick, so that was good. There's only a couple of cranks. Yeah, I got the vacuum pumps all back on there. Make sure you get that mounting bracket on the bottom. That's kind of a pain in the butt. But make sure that mounting bracket is on that bottom bolt for that vacuum pump. That bracket, you'll notice there's ground wires going to it. Those ground wires go to your ignition coils. If you don't hook that up, just leave that hanging, your car's probably not going to start. So be aware of that. That ground needs to be on there, and it needs to be fastened correctly. I guess that's about it. Aside from, I'm going to show you guys the the specs that I found online that hopefully will help you out. It helped me out. So these I found on a message board or whatever. So there's all the torque specs, and that's an eighth of a turn. Eighth of a turn is 45 degrees. Okay. 15 foot-pounds on that adjuster bolt. It's actually 14.75 if you convert it from Newton meters, because it's 20 Newton meters, but 15 is close enough. Yeah, so that should do it. I hope this video was very helpful to anybody that watches it, and I hope it wasn't too boring. I tried to keep it a little more fun than usual, a little shorter. Just keep on wrenching.